Welcome back to another project. In this project, we're going to create a Note app. As you can see from the final version of the project, we have a button here with this glassy design. And when we click on the button, a new note is going to be created. So we can just have a new note and we can write something inside it. For example, I'll just say nice. And you can add as many notes as you want. You can edit them. For example, I can just change this one to job and I can write something here, note. You can also delete them by double clicking on this note. For example, I double click and this is going to ask me, do you want to delete this note? And if I click on the OK, this is going to delete the note. And also when we refresh the page, the notes is going to stay inside the browser because they are stored inside the local storage of the browser. So we're going to learn how to write and save the notes inside the local storage and how to retrieve them using JavaScript. And also we're going to learn how to design this glassy or neumorphism design using CSS. In the next section, we're going to start with the HTML part of the project. So see you in the next section. All right, let's start our project. I just leave the final version here for our comparison. And let's start creating the project by just creating an HTML file. So I go to my desktop and I open the Visual Studio Code, or you can open any text editor you prefer. After closing the Get Started tab, we click on the File menu and we click on the Open folder. I would like to create the project in my desktop, so I click on Desktop, and here inside the desktop, I click on the New folder to create a new folder. I name the folder the name of our project, which is Note App, and I press Enter. After creating the folder, we can click here on the Select folder to start the VS Code again, but inside that particular folder, we can see here Note App. Inside the folder in the Explorer section, now we can create our HTML file. So we click here on this icon and we name the file index.html and I press Enter. You can see the HTML file on the right side. We can close the Get Started tab again. Now inside the index.html, we can have an HTML boilerplate by just adding an exclamation mark. So we write down an exclamation mark and we click on the first auto suggestion suggested by Emmet abbreviation. Now we have then HTML file boilerplate, which includes the doc type, which tells the browser which version of HTML we are working on. And for HTML5, we just have here an HTML, nothing else. Then we have an HTML tag, which covers the head tag and the body tag. The length attribute inside the HTML tag defines the language of the page, and in our case, by default, the language is set to be English. Then inside the head tag, we have 3 metadata tags and a title tag. The first metadata tag defines the chart set attribute and the characteristics. For HTML5, UTF-8 is recommended because it nearly contains all the characters and symbols. Then we have the compatibility meta tag, which tells the Internet Explorer browser to use the most recent rendering engine, which is Edge. The next metadata tag is related to the viewport, and it sets the width of the screen to device's screen. For example, the width of the screen for the computer would be bigger than the mobile screen. So it's going to automatically assign the width for our browser based on the width of the device we are using. Then we have the initial zoom level of the browser, which is set to be 100%. And after that, we have the title tag, which is by default is document. Let's open the browser to see this title. So if you use the live server extension, you can click here on the Go Live to open the index.html file automatically inside the your default browser, which in my case is Google Chrome. And you can see the title is documents. Let's bring the browser on the right side and the VS Code on the left side so we can see the changes on real time. And let's close the Explorer section by dragging it to the left side. If you look at the final version, you can see that we have a title for the website. Then we have an exclamation or information text. Then we have the notes and also the button for adding the notes. So inside the body section, we are going to add an H1 tag for this note app, and we just write down notes app. So we can make the A capitalized too. And also we can add a class here for styling it later using CSS. So the class I use for this one is heading. Then after the H1, we're going to have a paragraph, and the paragraph is going to have a text inside it, and it's going to be double click on a note to remove it. And also we can add a class for this one, and we just call this class info-text. All right. So after that, we're going to have our main application. So both of these things are inside a container, and this is a text area, and also this is a button. So we're going to add a container. We just added div with a class of, for example, app, and also an ID of app. So we're going to use this class for styling this div, and also this ID to add functionality to this section using JavaScript. And inside this div, we're going to have that text area firstly. So we add a text area. We don't need name for that one or ID. It just have a columns and rows. And also we add a class of, we just say note, because we want to style it later using CSS using this class. And also we're going to have a placeholder saying empty notes. All right, so we have the text area now. After the text area, we're going to have a button. So we're going to add a button with a class of btn and an ID of btn. Or this is going to be button, not button. Oh, sorry. Button is with U and O here. All right. So we have a button here. You can see it's small, but it doesn't have anything inside. I just want to add a plus sign inside it so you can see it better here. And for the text area, as we want to style it using grid, for example, if you have more, and if you have a different size of the screen, they're going to be different number of columns inside. So I'm going to add more of this, and we style it, and then we can remove it. So we just copy this one using Alt-Shift-Arrow down. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4 times I copy this one. We're going to style it, and then we're going to remove it, and later we're going to add it using JavaScript. So this is all working with JavaScript. It's not normal. We are not adding it with this HTML here. So we're going to add it dynamically using JavaScript later. But we have done with the HTML part. In the next section, we're going to install this project using CSS. So see you in the next section. All right, in the last section, we have completed the HTML part of the project. In this section, we're going to install the project using CSS. Just if we look at the final version real quick. So we have a title here, and we're going to have some shadow effect when we hover over these nodes. And when we hover over the button, we see a different design. And also we have a new morphism design, which is a kind of glassy design. So we have a different color inside the background, and we can have a glassy and transparent background color for the nodes as well. The first things we need to do is to create the CSS file of the project. We can do that one by opening the Explorer section. We just can use Ctrl-Shift-E, and here we click on this icon to create a new file, and we call it a style.css. The first things we need to do is to add a link to the CSS file within the HTML file. So we go back to index.html, we close the Explorer section, and just after the title tag, we add a link tag, and we click on the third auto suggestion, the one with the CSS. And now we have a relationship between the HTML file and the CSS file. And the destination of this one, we use the href attribute, and we just write down style.css as the address, as both files are located at the same directory. Now we can use the style.css. So let's start styling the body section. So we just write down body, we target the body, and we just open a set of curly braces. First, we remove the default margin, so we don't have any space between the elements and the wall of the browser. And then I want to change the background color. I want it to be a linear gradient. And this is going to be from left to right. So we just write to left. And the first color is light blue. And the second one is light green. This is going to give us a color that starts from blue to green, and it starts from the left to the right. So from the left we see the green one, and from the right we see the blue one. So if you open it, you can see it better. All right. And the other things I want to do, I want to change the font family, and we set the font family to Courier New, which is my favorite font, but you can use any font you prefer for your own project. The next things we want to style is this heading here. If you remember, inside the body section, we add an h1 tag with a class of heading, and we just write down Note App. So here we can target that one using dot heading because it is a class. And after that, I want to change the color of that to be dark blue. We can see it here. And I wanted to bring it to the center using text align center like this. Then let's add some padding to the top. So we add some space at the top of 10 pixels. And finally, I want to change the font size and make the size of the text bigger by using 35 pixels of font size. All right. So that was it for the heading section. Let's style this font, the info text. Inside the HTML, we have added a paragraph with a class of info text. So we can target that one by using .info-text. We open a set of curly braces, and here we can bring it to the center using a text align center. And I want the color of that one to be dark blue as well. And we can set the font size, the size of the text, to be 18 pixels like this. So now it's time to style these notes and the button. If you look at the final version, you see the notes are on top of each other when we have a smaller screen. In the bigger screens, as the size grows, we have more columns here. So we're going to target that div, this div with a class of app, which includes all the text area and the button. So we're going to style it. So we just say .app to target that div. I want to change the display to grid. So let's see here. When you set the display to grid, they come like a full screen first, but we can limit that one using the grid template columns. We're going to repeat that with the autofill. So you just write down autofill, and we want to autofill it every 30 pixels. So we set this one to 30 pixels, the width of that one. And if this one gets, for example, 600 pixels, they come next to each other. And then we have more and more like this. So all of them, they became the same size. Even the button became the same size of the note. But there is no space between them. So we can just change the gap of that to 40 pixels. So we have a 40 pixels gap between these grids, as you can see. So it's very easy to make a responsive design by grid system. So we have just added a grid template columns, and we autofill it by 300 pixels width. And we have added 40 pixels of gap. Now we can just bring them to the center using justify center, justify content, center. So they come to the center of the screen like this. And also I want to push this text a little bit in, push everything to the inside using padding, pushing everything, just add some padding of 50 pixels. So this is going to have more space around this div, so we can have maximum 3 grids in one screen. Now we can install this note here. So each of them, we want to add some shadow effect, and also we want to have a transparent background color. So each text area, if you pay attention, it has a class of, oh, it doesn't have any class actually. So we have to have a, it has a class, sorry. It has a class of note here, all the text areas. So I'm going to style it using .note. Let's set the height of this one to 200 pixels. So let's see. So maybe we don't need that height. So first we remove the height, and later we're going to add it if we need it. So we add some padding of 17 pixels. So we push everything inside like this. And we want to make the borders have corners. So we add the border radius of 15 pixels. And the other things I want to do, I want to prevent the resizing, because now you can resize this one. But this is going to mess up the grid system. So we set the resize to none. And let's add some shadow. So by saying box shadow, I want it to be 0 in the x-axis, 0 in the y-axis, but 3 pixels blurriness, you can see. And I want the color of 000 for black color and 30% transparency. So this is going to give us a nice shadow. And also, let's, I think everything is okay now. Let's change the font size to be 18 pixels. So let's refresh the page first. Okay. I think we need to add that height. So we just add the height of 200 pixels. So this is going to be a state, and we cannot change it. And let's change the color to be dark blue. So whatever we write down here, the text would be dark blue. And let's set the, well, let's remove the border. So I don't want this black border. So we remove the border by just saying border none. This one looks better. And also when we click on it, we see a border too. So this one, we call it outline. So we can remove the outline by just saying outline none. Now, even we click, we don't see the outline, but we're going to add an outline ourselves by adding a box shadow. Then we have a background color of RGBA. We set the RGBA. We want a white background color by just adding 255, 255, 255. This is a white background color, but with 10% transparency. So we can see it like this. So now you can see it's like a glassy design, and any places they're located. For example, this is a greener than this one. So it looks very nice. And in order for the size of this one to always be the same as the button, button, we add the box sizing border box. So this is going to remove the extra sizing, so we can adjust this one exactly like that button, because sometimes button has an extra things. So this is not going to cover that. So we're going to add the box sizing here. Then we're going to style this placeholder. So we just say .note. We target the placeholder by adding 2 colon. And we set the color to be gray. And also I wanted to have an opacity of 30%. So it's harder to read it. Empty this one. Okay. Looks okay. And also I want to have some shadow, more shadow when I hover over it or when I click on it. So we just say .note. We target the hover by just saying clone hover. So we target the hover pseudo class. And also I want to target the focus pseudo class. So we just say .note focus. So both of them, I want, when this one happens, I want to have a box shadow of 0 and 0 for the X and Y axis. But instead of these 3 pixels blurriness, I want to have a 10 pixels blurriness. And with the RGBA of the black color 000 and 0.3, which is the 30% transparency. Now we hover over it, you see more shadow, or if we click on it, we see more shadow. So click is focus, hover when we hover over it. So, but this one is happening very fast. We can add a transition. So we make it like an animation, more smooth. So we add a transition, all we apply to everything, and we just say 300 milliseconds with the ease effect. So now when we hover over it, the shadow comes slower like this. Now it's time to install this button. So we target the button. The button has a class of btn. So we just target that one. We just say .btn, and we set the height of that to be 200 pixels, similar to the notes. As you can see, they are the same size. But if you remember, we add box sizing. If you remove the box sizing, the size of the notes are bigger than the button. That's why we have added the box sizing. So let's go here. After the height, we add a border color. We set the border color to be an RGBA, white color with 37% of transparency, like this one. Then we want to have a background color, RGBA, white color with 27% of transparency. So we can see like this. And let's set the border radius. We add a corner of 15 pixels. So we can now actually remove these text areas. So actually we don't need them, because later we're going to add these text areas using JavaScript. So we just had that one. I just can, we just can remove all of them except one. Okay, so we can see the button now clear. So the border radius was 15 pixels. After that, we're going to set a font size of 70 pixels. So we have a bigger plus sign, and we set the font weight to be 700, and we set the color of the text to be an RGBA, with the black color and 30% transparency, like this. And we set the cursor to be pointer. When we hover over the button, we see a pointing hand. And now we want to target the hovering effect. When we hover over the button, first thing first, we want to change the background color. We use RGBA to set the white color, but instead of, we just set it to be 55% transparency, like this. And also I want the color to be an RGBA with the black color and 60% transparency. So it's going to be a little bit darker, the plus sign. And here we also want to add some transition to apply to all with 300 milliseconds delay and ease effect. Sorry, 300 millisecond duration. It's similar to the one here. Yeah, that was it for the styling of the project. We have learned how to add the glassy design with the shadow effect and also this beautiful button. In the next section, we're going to learn how to add more functionalities, like adding a new note or deleting a note by double click on the note using JavaScript. So we're going to learn many things. For example, if you refresh this page, you still see the notes. So all the notes are going to be stored in the storage of the browser. So we call it local storage. So you're going to learn how to get and write information from and to the local storage using JavaScript. So see you in the next section for the JavaScript part of the project. Welcome back. In this section, we're going to work on the JavaScript part of the project. If you look at the final version, you can see by clicking on this button, we can add a new note, and by double clicking on the note, we can delete it. So let me delete all of them first. Now we don't have any note, and if we click, we get a new note which is empty, and we can just write something. For example, I just write hello, and this is going to update this note, and even we refresh the page, we see still the note. So let me show you how this system works. If we open the web developer tools using Ctrl+Shift+C, and we go to applications, and also we go to local storage, you can see that inside the local storage, we have a key with the name of Note app. All right. And then this one has a value, which has an ID that we're going to produce randomly. And also it has a content, which is for now is hello. If we add another one, for example, if I click on this button, I create another one that you can see here. It has a new ID and the content should be empty for now. The content is empty. And if you write down something here, for example, nice, we see the nice inside the content. So that's why if you refresh the page, we get all the information from this local storage and we repopulate this page so you don't see any changes. And also if we, for example, delete the nice one by double clicking on here and click on OK, you see that that particular object is removed from the array, the Note app array. So we're going to do the same things. We're going to, in our project, we're going to remove and add these objects from the key Note app. So we're going to use some methods called getItem and setItem inside the local storage to add and remove and update the data inside the local storage. So let's go to the our website and let's refresh the page. So as you can see, we just have an empty note, but we are not able to create a new one. So we need to create a JavaScript file and add an event listener to this button. So when we click on it, we're going to call a function that is going to populate a new note for us. So let's create a new JavaScript file. So we're going to open the Visual Studio Code and Explorer section using Ctrl-Shift-E. And here on the left side in the Explorer section, we click on this icon to create a new file and we call it index.js. We have the JavaScript file, which is empty, but we cannot use it yet because we need to add a script tag inside the index.html to add a link between these two files. The script tags always goes at the end of the body tag because we need all these elements to be loaded in the browser and then we can manipulate them using JavaScript. So just on the opposite of the link tag that is going to be at the top inside the head section, we need to add the script tag at the end of the body section. So we just write down SC and we click on the second auto suggestion, the one with the SRC. And the source for this script tag would be index.js, as both files, I mean the index.html and index.js, are located at the same directory. So now we can use the JavaScript in our project. The first things we need to do is to bring this button. We want to have access to this button. Because the button has a class as an ID of btn, we can target that one here using a method called getElementById. And we just create a constant and we call this one btn element. And this is going to be equal to document because we want to target all the browser, and any ID that has the name of btn would be targeted by this method, getElementById. Now, if we add an event listener to this one and we just add an event listener, and the event we want to add is click. So because we want to click on the button, and this click is going to call a function, and we just call the function add note. So now we can create this function. We just create this function here at the top, and we call the function add note. So let's make this one camel case. So now add note. So let's test this one by console logging, for example, click. All right. So now if we go to our website and we open the console using F12, make sure that you open the console by clicking on the console. Now the console is empty, but when we click on this button, we see that clicked is printed inside the console. If we click more, we see that more clicks is showing inside here. All right. So the function is working and the add event listener is working as well. So we need to work on the add note function and add more functionality to it. So we go back to Visual Studio Code and we delete this console log for now. Now we want to create, for example, if you remember, each object of the node has an ID and a content. So the ID is created randomly and the content at the beginning is just an empty string. So here we create a constant and we call it node object or IOBJ. And this is going to be equal to an object. The first one is an ID, which is going to be created randomly. So we can use math method, math, for example, dot random. This is going to create a random number between 0 and 1. We need to call this one. And we're going to multiply this one to a big number, for example, 100,000. All right. And we need to make this one rounded. So we just say math.floor. And this is going to cover this random here. So we have the ID now. Let's create the content. The content for now is just an empty string. So we need to add a comma here at the end. So let's now just console log the node object, node OBJ. So let's go back to our website. Now, if you click on this button, this is going to create an object with a random ID and with an empty content. If you click again, it's going to create another one with another random number. So the number is from 0 to 100,000. So it's mostly going to be random. You can add more numbers or letters to make it completely unique. But for simplicity, I just use the 0 to 100,000. This is going to create a random number with an empty content. So now that we have created this object, based on this object, we need to create that node element. So we're going to create another constant and we call it node element. And this is going to be equal to another function, and the function is called create node element. And this is going to pass this node object, first the ID, and also we want to pass the content, which is node object.content. So now we need to create this function. This is not a JavaScript function. We need to create this function. So let's create it at the top. So we create another function, and this is going to be called create node element. And the input is ID and content. So we're going to have two things here inside the input of the function. So the first one is ID and the second one is content. All right. So now we have access to these two. We can console log and see. So we console log ID and the content. Let's see in our website. Let's open the Explorer section, the console section using F12. So each time we click, we get an ID and content. The different ID and content, which is empty for now. So we have access to that ID and content from this function. So let's create the element. There is a method in JavaScript for creating an element. It is called create element. So you just need to have const. We needed to create a constant, and the constant is called element. And this is going to be equal to document because we want to create the element inside the document. And we use the create element method, which is a JavaScript method. And this is going to take which element we want to create. For example, if you want to create a paragraph, we just write down P. If you want to create, for example, a H1 tag, you just write down H1. But because we want to create a text area, we just write down here text area. So this element is this element now. So we have created an element, a text area element. So now we have created this one. If you remember in the HTML, the text area has many things. It has a class of node and it has also a placeholder. These two things were very important actually. So we need to add this one to the element as well. So because this element is completely empty. So we can just add a class name by just saying .classList.add, and the class we want to add is just node. This is similar to here. class equals note. This is going to be added to that element. The next things we want to add is the placeholder. So the placeholder is going to be empty note, similar to the one here we have added. So this is the way we add elements and add attributes to the element inside the JavaScript. And also this element's value, the value of this one is going to be to this content now. So we just say content, because later we can add different content, not this one. For example, we can add something that we want to update inside this text area. So now we have created the class list, the placeholder, the value. All right. Now we want to add two other things to this element. One, if you remember in the final version, if we double click, we can delete this note. So we need to add an event listener which listens to the double click. So when we go here, we can add this one here too. So we just say the element that we have created here. Let's add an add event listener to that one. And the event listener we want to add to this one is double click. So we just write down DBL click, and this is going to delete that note. So we can create the delete here. For example, we create a function here that we can add the delete functionality. Because for deleting, we want to add a warning like this, because this is asking you, do you want to delete the note? And if you click OK, this is going to be deleted. So we want to add this warning here. So we just create a constant and we call it warning. And this is going to be equal to confirm, because this is a confirm window. And the message for that one, we just say, do you want to delete this note? And we add a question mark. And if the answer for this one is okay, this warning would be true. So this warning can be true or false based on the answer. If the answer is okay, is true. If the answer is no or cancel, is going to be false. So we just add a condition here. If the note delete, if the warning is true, then delete the note. So we're going to create a function called delete note, and we should create this one, which is getting the ID of the note and also the elements that we have created here. So we want to remove the element later if we delete it. So now we don't have this function. Let's create this function for now so we don't get an error. So we create this function and we call it delete note. Just for now, we just leave it empty. Let's see if we get an error. No, we don't get an error now. So we have added the double click. The other things we want to add here, if you look at the final version, now we just have the hello, for example. I can delete this hello and just say nice. You can see that the content is changed to nice. So we want to add the ability to update the note. So we need to add another event listener. So after this event listener, we're going to add another one, which is going to listen to everything happened inside the input. For example, any change happened inside the input. If this one happened, we want to create a function here that is going to update the note. So it's going to update the note, and we're going to pass the ID, and also we want to add the element value, because we want to change the value that we are updating, because the content would be different. We want to update it. So we need to create this function as well. So I'm going to create another function and I call it update note. So we're going to work on it later. So let's see, we can see any results now. No, we need to actually, when we create the note, we want to add it here. So if you remember here, inside the function add note, we have created a random number and we pass it through it to the create note element. After the creation, we need to insert this one inside the DOM. What I mean by that, if you look at the final version, when we add a new note, it is going to be added inside this array, but before the button. All right. There is a method in JavaScript, and it is called insert before. So first thing first, we need to go to, in the HTML, we need to target this div, because we want to add this text area inside this div, a new text area inside this div. but before this button. So first thing first, we need to target this div. So inside the JavaScript at the top, I'm going to bring that app element, and this is going to be equal to document.getElementById, and the ID that we are targeting is app, because the ID of this div is app. So now we want to add that new element inside this app, but before the button. So the things we do here, we just target that app element, and we just use that method that I have mentioned, which is insert before. So we just say insert before, and this is going to take two things. If you see the node that we want to add, and also the child that we want to be before that. So we want to add that node element that we have created by this function. We want to add this one, but before the button. The button was btn element. So let me explain it again. So we have targeted that div with the ID of app, and we have inserted this node that we have created here before the button. So let's see if we can see any result here. So when we click here, so let's see what error we have created. So the error is to execute insert on a node. The paragraph 1 is not the type node. So let's see. So the first one has an error because we haven't, I think, completed the create node function yet. So let's complete that one. Let's see what we have missed here. So the create node element, the function is created here, and it gets the ID. It creates the element. Oh, sorry, we have created the element, but we didn't return it. So we need to, at the end, return that element. The return means that we have created this one, but what is the output of this function? We have the input here, but what is the output? The output, there are a lot of things inside this function happening, but we want to just the element goes outside of the function. Now this one goes outside and be replaced by this node element here. So let's try now. So if you click on this one, we see a new node is added here. So we can add as much as we want here. But when we refresh the page, all of them goes away because we haven't saved any of them inside the local storage, as you can see here. We can fix this one by just adding everything to the local storage inside the add node function. So after inserting this new created node, we can just create another function called save node, or save node local storage, if you want to call it. And we're going to pass it an object. We call it nodes. But we need to create the nodes first. So here we just create a constant and we call it nodes. At first, we just make it an empty string. But after creating this nodes object, we're going to push the new node inside this nodes. So we just say nodes.push, and this is going to be equal to node object that we have created here. So this is just an empty first, and then we create this one, and then we put it inside this nodes, and then we're going to save it inside the local storage. So now we're going to create this function, the save node. So we're going to create another function and we call it save node, that is going to get the nodes first. So we get the nodes from the input and we're going to save this node inside the local storage. So we just call local storage dot, for saving inside the local storage, we use a method called set item, and we need to call the key first. If you remember, inside the final version, I'll show you the key is node app. We can call it anything we like. For example, I call it node app like this, and this is going to be equal to that nodes. But we cannot save this array directly inside the local storage. This is not allowed. We need to change this one to the string, because this is an array. It is not allowed. For a browser doesn't allow you to save an array inside the local storage for safety reason, because you can just add some malicious code inside the local storage. But you can convert this one using JSON dot stringify a string. This one should be dot stringify. And now we just put the notes that we are notes. This should be notes from the input of the save note function. So let's try this one now. Now we are inside the document. We go to the local storage inside the application. We go to the local storage here. Let's remove this one. This is from the final version we have. This is completely empty now. Let's refresh our website. And when we click on this one, a new note is added in our browser. And also you can see inside the local storage, we have a new key, and it is called Note App with a new array, which is ID with this ID and this content. But the problem is when we click again, this is going to be replaced by the new one, because we always here we set the notes to be empty, and then we're going to push one new object inside this empty array. So we can first get the information from the local storage, and then we're going to push the new one at the end of the array. So instead of just creating an empty array, we're going to get all the nodes from inside the local storage. What I mean by that, we're going to create a function called getNode. We're going to call this function and put it inside these nodes. And this function, we're going to create it here at the bottom. So we create another function and we call it getNode or getNodes. Probably it makes more sense. So let's change that one to getNodes as well. And this is going to get all the nodes that is already inside the local storage. So it is very simple. It is similar to the save nodes. So we're going to firstly, because all inside the local storage is stringified already, we need to convert that one to an array. There is a method called parse, and we call it parse. We need to parse that one. So we need to parse whatever inside the local storage. So we just say local storage, and for getting the data, we just use get item instead of set item. And the get item is going to, first we need to know which item to get. And if you remember, the key was Note App. So we're going to get everything inside this Note App. And if there is nothing inside, if it's empty, we're going to just have an empty array instead. All right, because we don't get an error. All right, so we get everything inside, or if there is nothing, we get an empty array. So now we need to return this one. If you remember, we got an error before by not returning. So the output of this function would be this parsing, and this is going to be, this is going to go inside this nodes, whatever inside the local storage. Now, if we come back to our website, and if you refresh the page and we delete this, whatever inside we have, now we're clicking, we're going to create a new Note App inside the local storage. If you click again, we're going to create a new one that is added to the previous one. And this is not replaced. As you can see, we have two objects. The first one is the first element is this one, and the second element is and whatever we add, it's going to be added inside the local storage. So now after creating this one, we need to have that ability to edit and delete these nodes. And also, if you when we refresh, you see that everything else is gone. So we don't have anything. So we need to actually get all the information that is already inside the local storage and populate all these nodes here. So the first one is actually fake, and it is inside the index.html. Let me delete this one so we don't get confused that we have some node. Actually, we don't have any node. We can add it to the local storage is added, but it's not shown inside our browser. So we need to create all of them. So let's go back to index.js, and before everything, we're going to first get all the data from the storage, and we're going to loop through all of them. We get all the nodes, and we populate the nodes inside that this application element. So we call that function that we have created getNodes, that is going to get all the nodes from the local storage. When this one happens, this is going to gives us all the nodes. So this is going to be equal to that nodes. So we want to loop through this one. We're going to use a method called for each. For each is going to give us each node. So this one is going to give us each node one by one, and we're going to populate this one. And for example, we just call the node element each of them. And if you remember, we have created a function called create node element. So we're going to call this one and create the element that is going to have the node.id and also the content inside that node that we are getting from the each loop. All right, so we get and we create them first, and then inside this app.element, we're going to insert them. And if you remember, we want to insert them using insert before, and this is going to be that node element that we are creating here, and this is going to be before that button there. So now if you go to our website, we see all the nodes that inside the local storage. Even we refresh the page, we're going to repopulate them by this line of code, this get nodes for each, and we're going to populate them each time someone comes to the website. All right. So for example, if I delete this local storage and we refresh the page, we don't see any nodes because the local storage is completely empty. So let's add a new node. And so you can see it here. We refresh the page. We still see it inside the browser. So as I mentioned before, we want to have the ability to update this one. For example, if I write down something here, we don't see any change inside the content. The content is still empty. So we want to actually complete that event listener that we have added, the updating based on the input. If you remember, we have created a function called update node, but now it is completely empty. Now it's time to complete this update node. So the update node is going to get two things, the ID and the content. So the content is coming from the element.value. So we have the ID and the content. Now we want to create, first thing first, we want to get all the nodes. We get all the nodes using the get nodes function that we have created here. We get all the nodes from the local storage and we call it nodes. The things we want to do is to change and update the nodes inside it. So this is going to be called target, and we just filter through these nodes because we want to know which nodes we want to update. Based on this ID, we're going to filter through that. So we're going to use a method called filter, and filter is going to give us a node, each node, but the node we want is the one with the ID equal to that ID that we are getting from here. And this is going to return, for example, this is going to return actually one element, but we need to target the first one here. So we just say 0, the element with the number 0, because it's the first one. Now we have the target, which is the node with this ID. We just want to change the content of this target, and this is going to be equal to this content that we are getting here. After creating the target, we're going to save the node. We use the function save node. Let me see, where was it? Here, save node that is getting, and then we pass this nodes here. So let's try this here. So now you can see that is empty. Now let's try to write something here. As soon as we write something, we see this is updated and it's called nice. And if we add something else, let's see the second one. Now the second one, I just write, for example, job. All right, you can see this is job now. And if you click here, we can see the changes here as well. So we can add many nodes you want. And also, if you refresh the page, we see still the contents is there because they are coming from the local storage. So we have done with this part, but what about deleting? The deleting, if I remember, we had an add event listener, which is going to target by double clicking on the node. When we double click, a window is going to pop up asking, do you want to delete this node? And if you click OK, you're going to call a function called delete node. But we haven't created this function yet. Actually, we have created the function, but we haven't completed the function delete node. So first thing first, they ask with the warning, do you want to delete this node? If the answer is okay, this is going to call this function, delete node. So the input for delete node, if you're here, we pass the ID and the elements. So we're going to get that ID, and also we're going to get that element here. All right. And inside this delete node function, first thing first, if you remember, we need to get the nodes. So we need to get the nodes from the local storage. And here we call it just node. And we just say get nodes, but we don't want to get all of them. We want to filter, and we just want the one with this ID. So we use the method called filter. The things the filter does, we want to keep all the nodes except the one with this node because we want to delete it. So the trick for this one is we get the node here, and we're going to keep all of them except with the one with the ID of this ID here. But this one shouldn't be equal. Should be not equal. It means keep everything except the one with this ID. So this is going to filter in a way that keeps everything except the one that has this ID. So now we have the nodes. So we want to update the local storage. So we just say save node, and we're going to pass this nodes here. Now we have updated the local storage, but we still haven't removed this element from the DOM. So if you look at our website, for example, if just look at this one from the local storage, the nice. So I double click here and I click OK. This is going to remove that nice from the array, but this is still inside the browser. But if you refresh the page, we don't see it, but we want this one happens simultaneously. We don't want to refresh the page. So as soon as we delete, for example, this job, we want this one to go away from the DOM as well. So we can do this one here by just targeting that app element, and we wanted to use a method called remove child. And the child we want to remove is that element that is passed inside this function, that is passed here inside this function. All right, so we want to remove that element. Now, if you, for example, want to delete this one, so let me fix this one and make it, for example, nice. You see the first one is nice. When I double click and I click on OK, this is going to be removed from the local storage and also from the browser. So if you don't see it now and I refresh the page, also you can only see this node. I think we have added all the functionalities. So let's see, let's add more. Let's close this one. So now, for example, I can edit this one. I can write down anything I want, and it stays in the local storage. I can delete this node, this node. So everything is working fine, I think, for our project. I hope you enjoyed the project and learned many things. Actually, there were many concepts inside this project, including how to save and restore from the local storage, how to edit, how to update an object, how to create an element inside the DOM, how to remove an element from another container. I hope you enjoyed and learned many things. See you in the next project.